The next theory on the list is the behavioral theory, and this theory maintains that people's behavior is in reaction to their environment and that behaviors are developed through daily interaction with others and the world. In this theory, they look at how our interaction with our environment, the way we relate with our environment, and how they have effects on our behavior. The behavioral therapist practitioners focus on observing behaviors, current determinants of behaviors, learning experiences that promote change, and then tailor the treatment strategies to individual clients and rigorous assessment evaluation. They are often used in the field of developmental disabilities, mental illness, education, special education, community psychology, and clinical psychology, and so on. So it has three major areas of development that when we look into it now, it will help us to understand how our environment and the things we are exposed to can influence our behavior. The first one is classical conditioning, which was an experiment carried out by a Russian psychologist known as Ivan Pavlov, where he used bell and dogs. Originally, when dogs see food, they will start salivating, which is the response to a stimulus. The food is the stimulus, and their salivation is the response to a stimulus. But then, instead of giving them the food directly, Ivan placed something between them, which is a bell. Before giving them food, he will ring a bell, and every time he rings the bell, the dog already knows that food is coming. So even before seeing the food, they start salivating. But as this continues over time, when the dogs hear the sound of a bell, even without seeing even when the food is not eventually coming, they will still salivate. So in this situation, it's very popular to be able to condition them to start salivating at the sound of a bell, which is their response to their stimulus. He has been able to elicit a behavior from them by stimulating them with a particular action. Then the next one is the operant conditioning. It involves a type of learning in which behaviors are influenced by the consequences that follow them. If the environmental changes brought about by the behaviors that are reinforcing, that is, if they provide something rewarding to the organism or eliminate aversive stimuli, the chances are increased that the behavior will occur again. For example, when we are training kids and we are promising them that if you take first this term, I will get a bicycle. That is a form of operant conditioning because we have reward that action with something that will be of interest with them. It is likely that they want to do it again so that they get it again. And if they do something bad that we punish them for it or beat them for it, they are likely to stop doing it. That is that about operant conditioning. Then we have the social learning approach, which was developed by Abbas Bandura. It is interactional, interdisciplinary, and multimodal. Social learning and cognitive theory involve a triadic reciprocal interaction among the environment, personal factors, preferences, expectations, self-perceptions, and interpretations, and in individual behavior. So what this simply means is that it also happens in kids most times. It is when they learn from what they see. For example, what the mother and the father does in the house. They look at it, learn from it, and it shapes their behavior. And it is how they are going to continue to behave as time goes on. An example of social learning is how people can develop effective social skills after they are in contact with other people who effectively model interpersonal skills. This means that, for example, I would say I practice introvert sometimes, or that is my personality, that I'm an introverted person, and then I get to be someone that is an extrovert. Then after relating with that person over time, after being exposed to how they behave, after being exposed to how they talk, I am likely to emulate their behavior. That is social learning theory. And under this theory, the example of therapy we have is exposure therapy, which means we are gradually confronting the situation we feared until that fear disappears. For example, someone who is afraid of public speaking, they can't stand in front of crowd, and you want them to start speaking in the public. You can start by taking them to conferences or letting them watch talk shows. So they start seeing people who are facing the crowd to talk. They may find it interesting as time goes on and admire the person like, I wish I can talk the way this person is talking. Gradually, you can maybe if they are in a secondary school, You can ask them to join debate club. If they see what their peers are doing there and seeing how they are progressing, they may also want to start doing it gradually. They have the fear for it before, but when we are exposing them to it a little bit by bit, they will then start trying to emulate and play along until that fear for it is replaced with something that will interest them to start practicing it. And that is exposure therapy under behavioral theory. The next theory we have here is cognitive theory. Cognitive theory theorizes that an individual's thoughts, feelings, and behavior are all connected. That human behavior is strongly influenced by how we think. There's a popular saying that what we think is what we do. And because we think with words, we don't think with symbols. Whatever thoughts you have, it will be as if you are speaking to yourself. So when you think, you are speaking to yourself, and the things you are thinking are likely to be elicited or exhibited in the way you behave. Therefore, the therapies under cognitive theory are types of psychotherapy that focus on changing a person's thinking based on the assumption that our thoughts influence our feelings. An example of a therapy under this cognitive theory is rational emotive behavioral therapy, which was introduced by Albert Ellis in 1955. It used a practical action orientation approach to manage emotional, behavioral, and cognitive disturbances. This therapy maintains that one's thinking about certain events can cause emotional as well as behavioral upset. For example, this therapy uses a technique called ABC technique, which A refers to the event activation or activation of the event. For example, a student in secondary school failed mathematics in a particular term. Then that is the event activation, which is the A. The B now comes, which is the belief or thinking. The students will now start feeling like, oh, I'm very poor in math. This is very bad of me. I'm not good enough. They will start thinking bad about themselves. Then the C will now come, which is the consequence. The consequence is that they may be anxious, they may be depressed, and they may not perform better next time because they have already believed that. They are thinking and making them believe that they can perform better. Then, when we now get to the front of the counselor will now use D. We use A, event activation, we use B, the belief, and we use C, the consequence. The counselor will now use the D, which is the dispute. He will dispute the feeling or the thinking of the clients that what made them think you can't perform better? What is the evidence that because you failed one subject out of 9, you are poor? So with those statements, they will not start to dispute the client's belief. Now we are moving to E, effective new belief. A is activation of events, B is belief, C is consequence, D is dispute, and E is effective new belief. We now start to help the child to believe that, oh, I can do better. Failure is not the final. I can still rise again after this. So that's about rational emotive behavioral therapy under cognitive theory. The next one here is the humanistic school of thought. And this school of thought is focused on the belief that it is focused on the belief in the inherent goodness of people. The purpose of this type of counseling theory is for individuals to realize their own goodness and make rational choices so that they can reach their greatest potential. Like the term says, humanistic. It is basically humanistic. It wants you as a person to look into yourself and see that I can really do this, regardless of the environment I am. Behavioral talks about environment, how they affect our behavior. Psychoanalysis talk about how unconscious and past experiences affect our behavior. Cognitive talks about how our thinking affects our behavior. But humanistic wants you to know that regardless of the unconscious situations, regardless of the environment, regardless of your thinking, as long as you are a human being, you have the ability to improve yourself by yourself. So, humanistic counseling is centered not on the past, but the present and the person's free will and determination. Notable contributors to these approaches include Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. Abraham Maslow developed what we call hierarchy of needs, where we have physiological needs, safety needs, social or belongingness needs, emotional needs, and self-actualization needs. This hierarchy helps us to understand what human beings will need at different stages of their life. Physiological needs include food, clothing, shelter, safety needs, the urge to be safe wherever you are. Then you also have social or belongingness needs. The urge to be loved, to feel among, to feel that you belong to a particular family, or you are loved by someone, or you belong to a particular social group. Then you have the esteem need, your self-esteem, that yes, I am also this person, I am also that person. And finally, self-actualization, when you are able to actualize something that you've always looked into, that this thing, I must reach there. When you get to that point, is where you actualize what you really want for yourself. So this is the contribution of Abraham Maslow into humanistic theory. Then we have client-centered therapy by Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers is an American psychologist that believed that humans had the ability to change and grow into better people. Rogers believed that the person needed an environment that had empathy and genuineness so that they could become a good person. In this modality, also known as person-centered theory, the focus is on the self-actualization. This is why we call this client-centered therapy. This therapy is focused on you as a person. That's why the only technique or the major technique that the counselor or therapist use in this kind of therapy is active listening. The client will come, say this, say that, do this, I did that. All what the client has to do is to listen actively, unconditional positive regard. Like when the client says, I did this and I know it's very, very bad. It has to come from a place of self-awareness to know that this thing I did is very, very bad and I'm regretting it. So you won't allow the clients to feel very bad. You won't say, wow, so you did this. You have to say, oh, thank you for trusting me enough to share that with me. They will know that you are creating an empathetic environment for them to share their feelings more, and then share to the point where they'll be able to think of a solution by themselves. For example, when it may not even be a case of when you do something bad. You can be faced with decision making that you want to do, you have to choose between 3 or 2 things. Then you don't really know what to do. You can talk with someone to the point where, in the process of talking, you'll be able to know that I think this is the best choice for me, without the person telling you that choose this. So that is what client-centered therapy focus on. It focuses on self-worth, self-image, and ideal self. Then also, under humanistic theory, you also have gestalt therapy, developed by Fritz Perls, Laura Perls, and Paul Goodman. It is very experiential and now-focused. The techniques used in this gestalt therapy includes empty chair techniques, whereby, for example, you as a child, your dad did something and it's really triggered a part of you. You can't really face your dad with anger in you. I want to express that anger to be disrespectful. Instead of you to go and meet your dad with that anger, get an empty chair, get a chair for yourself, or sit down anywhere and face that empty chair and imagine that your dad is on the chair and express yourself in that anger state that you are. Because it's not really nice to suppress or repress anger. It's build resentment. Pour out that anger on that empty chair with the thinking that your dad is here. By the time you finish pouring it out, you'll be able to have clear mind, and you can now go to your dad with a clearer mind and narrate it in a way that he'll be able to understand you empathetically, to get that, oh, I must have done something wrong. Instead of you going to him in a state where you will now see it as abusive or disrespectful,